I think it's fundamentally important, and I see a lot of my students struggling with this. All right, so I have two waveforms here. You'll obviously see one says new and old. I remade a track just because I had to do uh, revitalize this because it was from a few, maybe 3 years ago at this point, and it looks like it's going to get released, and the dubstep drop isn't going to stand. So let me show you the old track. If you don't want to listen to this and just get in the tips, just skip there. Cool. This track is a melodic track besides this like surprise drop. That being said, I made a couple airs, or maybe now that my style not really changed, but I leveled up, I've noticed. The snare is too future bassy for dubstep. You can do a future bass snare for dubstep, but you got to make it work better. So I'm going to show you this second drop to you. Check it. Okay, so if you do like that drop, by the way, all those sounds are actually in my sample pack, Roid Rage, which if you didn't see my last video on how to Lost Lands dubstep, link that, whichever way it goes. I don't know, I can't see the recording while I'm doing it, so, you know, one of those corners, but you can also get the pack as well, has over 250 bass shots, has a whole example project file, which is in that video, Ableton 11 template, and you get 20 Serum presets. You can get it 20% off using YouTube 20. That's not what this video is about, but I just want to put that out there. If you skipped ahead here, this is what we have. We have newer drums versus older drums, and I want to show why that's important. First of all, if you're over-processing your drums or limiting your drums, you're going to notice a transient, which is this guy here and this guy here. You'll notice that the transients and then after this is not at complete 0, versus this is zeroed off. It's because this is true soft clipping. Soft clipping is going to make everything look squarified the harder you push it, versus this is limiting. And why I wouldn't limit my drums is because the transient will hit 0 and it'll push everything down for a square second. That's why you see this kind of go down and then we're back up. But here's the kick by itself. Let's go to, yeah. Versus this. And I think we can just kind of tell what sounds fuller. This is going to add a lot more impact. How do you make your kick sound that fat? Okay, so let me show you. Once again, I'm just going to use a kick from my pack. Let's say you have the kick here, right? So we have the transient, right? So it sounds like this. All you need to do is put on a soft clipper of your choice. I like G-Clip. It is free. You can use saturator. Doesn't really matter. And then even if you turn it up, you see how it becomes more squarified here? But you still have your transient noise, and then you have your squarification there. That is what soft clipping is going to do. Okay, so now if we have a limiter here and we turn it up the same amount our soft clipper is, just quickly play that. And let's just compare this real quick. You see how it has more integrity to the waves where it's not as squarified? This is because it is pressing your transient. It has a little more thud on your soft clipper. I don't know if you guys can hear that. You guys can do your own experiment or just crank up the gain a ton. You'll notice, but this may not seem like a lot because it's on your kick, but when you have it on a master or something and you're having all this sound, it can affect it, especially when you're pushing it to like -3, -5 dB. So how do you make your kick slap? First, just find a good sample, right? All you need is a good sample. Like I said, you use my pack, you splice, they're everywhere. Be Craze, Barely Live, Company, Subtronics, they all have amazing kicks, okay? So you guys can use those. So the cool thing to note is if you have a really good kick and you have a printed sub, I would do this with audio. You can't really see it on MIDI, but let's say you have your sidechain here. I'm just going to use utility real quick, and I'm carving out where I see these go together. This is being super particular, but if this is like, if you want the most perfect kick to sub correlation to make your track sound the fattest, this is what I learned from Samplifier, is he will take the end of the tail of your kick, wherever it is, and you're going to line up the phase with your sub. Now, this isn't perfect, obviously, but we're close. We could even take it a little bit shorter if I wanted it like there, maybe. So let's take version 1 versus version 2. And this looks very nice. It looks seamless. First, this one has a little there. Are you going to notice this? No, but it does maximize your loudness, and it does make it sound more cohesive at a low level. So if you really want a good kick-sub relationship, this is how you do it. Okay, let's get to snare. So snare, the biggest problem here, and in general snares, is they're going to have different sidechain values than your kick. Now, in this example, my snare is really short, and it's future bass. It doesn't hit as hard as, say, which if we look, we can see that we're sidechaining roughly about there. That's when your noise comes back in. You can hear that's the end of the body going into the tail. If you don't know, for snares, you have a transient, that first downbeat, your body, and then your tail. I usually don't sidechain my tail, but it's up to you. In this example, I sidechained out my whole tail. It almost feels too long. You can hear that where it should be almost like coming back in, but it's not, so the sidechain's too long. How do you fix this? Well, if you're using utility, just draw out where your snare is, and once again, line up your sub and get a healthy correlation. You can see where the sub starts coming in. This isn't perfect, but there's also a lot of noise in snares versus your kick, which is why it's much harder to get a perfectly non-phased version. So for your snare, just choose something big and bold, and if it's just a snare, low cut it. For example, I have a very loud snare. I forgot what it is. This one has one hell of a low end. Now that is supposed to be like a kick snare together, but if I was going to just use this as a snare that didn't want the low end, do this. Now would I need the low end at the beginning? No, but it still can sound pretty good. Your snares, your claps, none of that stuff needs low end. It just needs a punch through the mix, which is going to be supplied by sidechain. So as we know, sidechaining is key. And how do we sidechain a proper snare? Well, let's use a different snare, for example, because this one's pretty big. That's a cool one. Let's do this. So once again, we can see the transient, we see the body, transient, which do this. And if I could learn Ableton, do body and our tail. What's important here? Transient's obviously going to be peaking 0. I could just solo this. You can hear that click, right? That's going to be hitting 0. You have your body, which is going to be your like notation. Which you can see it's popping right here, like D sharp. Then your tail. Why sidechain is lesser on your tail is if we look at the first two, you have low end input, at least even if you're low cutting it like I am. Say we cut it at 100, just to be safe. We're peaking we're like 6 dB, right? So there's no room for anything else. This needs to be absolutely sidechained. So whatever your sidechain of choice is, or whenever you're checking, you need to have pretty much this carved out of your track. It can be something like that, bring it back in. So remember how I said it's almost like a 16th for my kick? My snare is going to be coming in, and I'm sorry about the crossover, you wouldn't really see that, but towards about the end of the high of the tail, I'm going to see it. So now we're at a 16th here. For my kick, I think we're like a little longer than a 32nd. So kick is obviously tighter than the snare in this situation. You can hear what that sounds like if I took it out of the snare. Now this is what we're going to take out of our basses. Okay, so now we have sub, and I'm just going to resample this real quick. Now we can see clearly the snare, the body, the tail, and there's the sub. You're starting to see the whee. That's the sub of it. Let's show another example of your snare. We did it only like around the body, and then if we did it too long, where I get the tail end, we'll do that. You can tell on this one it sounds delayed, right? That's too late of a sidechain. This one, you're going to be getting clipping issues as you push this harder, because even though we just resampled this in the real track, you're still having all this left over. If this is getting pushed, you'll hear the distortion here. Hear that? It's because when you push it too loud and your sub isn't clean, you get that. And then finally, we can see that transient, body, tail into this. Now, if I was looking at this again, I would probably make this a little smoother. So for example, for back here, we said it was 1/16, right? Which will probably go a little bit further, but we could also do something like this, down, and then rotate it up a little bit. So it sounds like this. We print it. Looks more natural as a snare going into this, kind of how this looks, but not as abrupt. We're bringing it in closer with the noise to a sub. Why did I dive deep down into sidechaining with your drums? Smacking drums don't matter if there's zero sidechain. And let me explain that. You could have this kick, once again, here, with this, and we know how it sounds already, but if we just play low cut on this, we just play these two together. Where's the kick? Where's this? You can't have smacking drums without your sidechain being unlocked. Now, if you want to use utility, all that, it's up to you, but you really need to understand these fundamentals to have a slapping track. And honestly, the sound selection for your drums, number 1, sidechain number 2, and how you're mixing them is number 3. And the mixing is just soft clip them if you want to get that standard dubstep sound. I know this is kind of a wonky way of explaining kicks and snares, but I think it's fundamentally important. And I see a lot of my students struggling with this. So if you have any other questions, please comment down below. I appreciate you. Have a great day.